They told you history was written in books, sealed in archives, preserved in churches and palaces. But the truth? The truth was written in sweat, in screams muffled by silk curtains, in the eyes of witnesses who were forced to watch acts that were never meant for public gaze. February 3, 1502, Rome had not yet seen the sun rise when the whispers began. 3 times, they said. 3 consummations, each one verified, counted, and recorded. Not out of passion, not out of love, but because entire dynasties hung on whether flesh could prove its loyalty. Imagine it, your most intimate act, dissected like a battlefield maneuver, documented by quills that scratched away innocence in the candlelit dark. This was no wedding night. This was a trial by endurance, a theater of flesh turned into political contract. Behind closed doors, Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of the Pope himself, lay not as a bride but as collateral, her body traded for land, alliances, and power that would stretch across Renaissance Italy like a shadow. And as witnesses leaned forward, not blinking, not breathing too loudly, they were not voyeurs. They were architects. They were verifying whether this night would produce heirs strong enough to shift the balance of Europe itself. You've been told history is about battles, treaties, kings, and queens. But you were lied to. The most decisive wars were often fought not on bloodied soil, but between bed sheets drenched in sweat and humiliation. The Catholic Church, the supposed guardian of morality, sanctioned these rituals. They demanded them. They blessed these obscene spectacles as holy sacraments because they knew something darker. Control over flesh meant control over bloodlines, and control over bloodlines meant control over empires. Think about it. What does it say about a world where your worth could be weighed in gold ducats, and your body inspected like a stallion before being sent into forced service? What does it say about men of God who watched from the shadows, quills ready, turning carnal intimacy into notarized law? You weren't supposed to hear this. You weren't supposed to know that your so-called civilized world was built not just on ink and blood, but on flesh, souled and sanctified. Tonight, I will pull you deeper into the darkness they never wanted you to see. Because once you hear the full truth, you will never look at history, or power, the same way again. Picture the chamber. December 30, 1501. The Vatican is thick with incense, but the air stinks of calculation. At the center of the room stands Lucrezia Borgia, only 21, silent as her father. Pope Alexander VI, barters her future with the same cold precision a merchant might haggle over livestock. 100,000 gold ducats. That was the opening number. Enough to fund a war, to build cathedrals, to drown entire cities in coin. Her body was the balance sheet, her womb the collateral. The Este family of Ferrara sat across the table, cloaked in velvet, but their eyes sharper than daggers. They wanted more than gold. They wanted territories, lands of Cento and Pieve. They wanted tax exemptions that would bleed Rome's coffers for generations. They wanted assurances written not only in ink but in flesh. This was no marriage contract. It was a purchase order, a guarantee that Lucrezia would produce heirs whose blood was Borgia but whose loyalty belonged to Ferrara. And here's the detail they never told you in school: this wasn't just about alliance. It was about humiliation. The Este envoys despised the Borgias, saw them as corrupt usurpers wearing holy robes. So they demanded proof not just of marriage, but of consummation itself. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the Pope's daughter turned into a performance. Flesh turned into spectacle. Understand this, in the Renaissance, politics was theater. Bloodlines were weapons sharper than steel. But what makes this moment chilling is the silence of Lucrezia herself. She stood still, practiced, unreadable. Years inside the Vatican had taught her how to wear a mask that no man could read. But behind those eyes, she was calculating. Because she knew the truth her father would never admit, her body was her only weapon, and she would wield it as ruthlessly as they wielded their armies. When Pope Alexander spoke, his voice dripped with silk but cut like iron. my daughter's virtue and vigor are beyond question. Yet if further assurances are required, we shall accommodate. The word struck like a blade. Additional assurances meant only one thing. The deal would not be sealed in parchment alone. It would be sealed in sweat, in penetration, in witnesses marking down each moment as if it were scripture. This was the Vatican's true marketplace, where salvation was sold, where bodies became contracts, and where a young woman's worth was tallied not by love, not by dignity, but by what could be proven in a single night. The wedding night was not private. It was never meant to be. Behind silk curtains, beneath candlelight heavy with the scent of burning wax, Lucrezia Borgia lay beside Alfonso d'Este. But they were not alone. In the shadows, silent men watched, scribes, priests, envoys, faces fixed like statues, eyes refusing to look away. Their task was not passion, not celebration, but verification. Every sigh, every movement, every consummation had to be documented, counted, confirmed. 3 times before the night ended. That was the record. 3 full consummations, each noted with the scratch of quills against parchment. Imagine the pressure. Imagine the weight of empire resting on flesh performing on command. The witnesses weren't perverts, they were architects of dynasties. The act itself wasn't lovemaking, it was politics in its rawest, most primal form. Flesh became the battlefield. Orgasm became treaty. Breathless exhaustion became proof of empire's continuation. For the Este family, this was insurance. They wanted heirs. They wanted living evidence that the Pope's daughter could produce sons strong enough to defend their bloodline. For the Vatican, it was theater, showing the world that even behind closed doors, Borgia power could not be questioned. The whispers that night weren't endearments, they were confirmations. Yes, it is done. Yes, it is valid. Yes, it is sealed. But here's the part no textbook dares to reveal, the humiliation was intentional. This ritual was not only about securing heirs. It was about submission. By turning the Pope's daughter into spectacle, by forcing her intimacy into the public record, Ferrara ensured dominance. They were not just marrying her. They were conquering her, body and soul. And yet, Lucrezia was no victim. Behind her calm eyes, she understood the game. If her body was the currency, then she would set its value. Each movement, each sigh, each staged glance at her husband became performance. She was not just enduring the gaze of witnesses. She was mastering it. Because the moment men believe they own you, you gain a power they cannot see, the power to manipulate their hunger, their pride, their shame. That night, the world thought Lucrezia Borgia had been conquered. But in reality, she was planting the seeds of her own dominion. And the witnesses, who believed they were architects, were unknowingly part of her design. Humiliation was not an accident. It was a weapon. The Catholic Church, the noble families, the power brokers of Renaissance Italy, they understood a principle darker than any battlefield tactic: if you can make someone expose their most private self in front of others, you own them. You do not just break their body. You break their spirit, their privacy, their identity. This was the psychology of dominance: humiliation as currency, shame as leash. Think about the spectacle of Lucrezia's wedding night. It was not simply a bizarre ritual. It was systemic. It sent a clear message: no one, not even the Pope's daughter, was untouchable. Flesh was property, intimacy was contract, and a woman's worth could be reduced to performance under scrutiny. By making the private public, the Este family and the Vatican created a blueprint, a system where power fed not only on loyalty but on degradation. This system survives today in forms most men never recognize. Strip away the costumes, the incense, the Latin contracts, and what remains is timeless. Those who rule understand that exposure equals control. Force a person to surrender their dignity in front of witnesses, and they will live forever in chains, whether of shame, silence, or obedience. But here's where the story sharpens into something more dangerous. Lucrezia was not just a pawn. She understood the mechanism. She saw that her body was the currency, but her silence, the mask she wore, was her weapon. She endured the ritual not as a victim but as a strategist. Because once she accepted the terms of their humiliation, she gained a unique advantage: she could manipulate those who believed they had stripped her bare. Do you see it now? This is the paradox of power. The very act meant to destroy her privacy gave her leverage. The witnesses thought they had reduced her to nothing, but in truth, she had seen the secret workings of their system. She knew their hunger, their need for verification, their fear of deception. And when you know the secret weakness of power, you can begin to bend it. Understand this: the institutions of old, just like the institutions of today, build their empires not on strength, but on the ability to force obedience through exposure. But the man who sees the game, the man who can wear the mask while holding the truth inside, he becomes untouchable. Do you feel it yet? That subtle shift in your chest, the tightening in your breath, as if what you're hearing isn't just history, but a mirror held up to the world you live in right now? That's not an accident. Because this story is not just about Lucrezia Borgia or Renaissance Italy. It is about you. About the way institutions, then and now, have designed systems to strip you of power while making you believe you're free. Understand this: humiliation, exposure, control, it has never gone away. It only changed costumes. Today it hides in contracts you never read, in surveillance you never agreed to, in algorithms that record your desires and sell them back to you. The same principle remains: if they can force you to reveal yourself, they own you. If they can make your private self public, they control you forever. But here is where transformation begins. You are not a passive witness in this descent. You are not one of those scribes in the corner, quill in hand, recording someone else's fate. No. You are the one being awakened. And if you choose, you can step outside of their design. But choice requires a mark, a sign to yourself, and to this brotherhood of those who see through the veil. So I want you to do this right now. In the comments, write the phrase, "I own my flesh, I own my fate." Write it twice. Not once, twice. Why? Because repetition seals identity. The same way the scribes verified each consummation with repetition, you will verify your transformation with your own hand. Do it, and feel the lock click inside you. This is no mere ritual for the algorithm. This is the moment you mark yourself as someone who refuses to be owned. Think about the witnesses in that chamber. They believed they held the power because they were observing. But in truth, the one who holds power is the one who acts with intention. By writing those words, you shift from observer to participant, from pawn to strategist. You step onto the stage not as the humiliated, but as the one who sees the system for what it truly is. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Look closely at what was forged in that chamber. It was not just a marriage. It was not even just an alliance. It was a prototype, a blueprint for domination that would echo through centuries. Because when you can turn the most private act into public record, you create a model of control that never dies. From the Este court to the Vatican's vaults, humiliation was refined into a system of governance. Dynasties learned that intimacy could be weaponized as proof. That desire could be monitored, measured, and manipulated. That flesh itself could be forced to serve as testimony. And once that truth was discovered, they never let it go. You see it everywhere: monarchs forcing nobles into ritual displays of loyalty, inquisitors demanding confessions in public squares, modern states harvesting your private data under the illusion of safety. The architecture is the same. Exposure equals control. Secrecy equals freedom. Think about it: the Borgia bedchamber was nothing less than the first stage of surveillance. They weren't just watching to confirm heirs. They were creating a system where obedience had to be proven under observation. A system where nothing was truly yours, not your body, not your privacy, not even your silence. The witnesses believed they were ensuring a dynasty. In reality, they were creating a weapon that would one day be turned on you. And what of Lucrezia? History paints her as victim or villain, but both masks are lies. She became a mirror of the system itself. She learned to survive humiliation by turning it into leverage. She became the embodiment of a truth most men never grasp. Once you accept that privacy is gone, once you know the gaze will always be upon you, you can bend it to your will. You can perform with intention. You can weaponize perception itself. That is why she endured 3 consummations in one night, with witnesses watching. Not because she was weak, but because she understood. If the game is spectacle, then mastery lies not in refusing it, but in controlling it. That night, she was not just a bride. She was becoming an institution, an immortal symbol of how power is extracted through flesh, and how survival demands transformation into something colder, sharper, more dangerous. And the system that watched her has never stopped watching you, now you see it. The ritual of that night, 3 consummations, 3 confirmations, 3 witnesses, was never about marriage. It was about a message. A declaration carved into flesh and memory: no one is private, no one is free, unless they claim the right to be. What happened in that bedchamber was not an exception in history. It was the rule. And that rule still binds you. You live in a world where observation is constant. Cameras watch. Algorithms track. Contracts bind. Institutions disguise humiliation as normal procedure, standard protocol, policy. The same way those envoys disguised their lust for control under the veil of holy marriage. The truth is this: every system, every empire, every institution you have ever known is built upon the same foundation, the forced exposure of the individual for the gain of the collective power. And yet, there is always a choice. Lucrezia Borgia understood it. She played the role they demanded, but inside, she forged herself into something untouchable. She let them believe they owned her body, while she quietly owned their perception. She wore their humiliation like armor. She became the strategist in a game they thought they controlled. So I ask you, which will you be? The scribe in the corner, scratching down someone else's fate? The pawn forced to expose himself for approval, validation, and permission? Or the master who sees the system for what it is, and bends it to his will? Do not mistake this for mere history. This is a mirror. They turned Lucrezia's flesh into contract, her humiliation into law. Today, they turn your habits, your desires, your data into the same. The methods evolve, but the truth does not. If you remain blind, you will be consumed by the gaze. But if you awaken, if you see, then the gaze becomes your weapon. This is why I told you what you were never meant to hear. Because once you know, you cannot return to ignorance. The descent is complete. The curtain has been torn back. You now understand the oldest truth of power: it is not forged only in blood and war, but in the stolen privacy of the soul. So decide now. Will you be owned? Or will you own your flesh, your fate, and the gaze that seeks to bind you?